to the SPS Digital Learning Hour.
Brought to you by the Digital Learning and Assessment Department.
We're coming to you from a conference room in Central Office, bringing you the latest news in the Springfield Public Schools in regards to technology, along with inspiring interviews from teachers who are using technology in the classroom.
We'll also inform you of the latest updates, practices, and news as it pertains to our district. Whether you are new to using technology in the classroom or are a seasoned vet, we are here to help.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Mike Thomas.
And I'm Suzanne Zargis.
In case you missed it, the latest blog post is out, and well, because you were on vacation, of course, you missed the last two blog posts, which were very interesting. The first one that you missed was all about the tools in PowerPoint that you can use. Some of the cool things that, when I wrote the blog post, I didn't even know were possible, like creating animations, doing screencasts very effectively, I might add, so that these are things your students can do too, which is pretty exciting. You can also morph slides together. I think that's the one that helps most with the animation. And you can also make infographics, which are like those giant posters with all the fancy words and the pictures and makes a nice looking presentation. That's an infographic. PowerPoint allows you to do that. The other blog post that you may have missed was one called What Does That Mean? And it looks at 4 terms within computer sciences. That is programming, coding, computational thinking, and computer science, of course. It delves into what those actually mean and how they work and how they apply to you. So go on to WeLearn to read those posts, or you can find those on the blog on Brightspace. In case you missed it, OneNote for Windows 10 made some improvements. These improvements are pretty awesome. And the biggest one that I'm going to focus on in my short little time here during our In Case You Missed It is this visual dictionary. Yes, I said it. It's a visual dictionary. It's part of learning tools. So when you highlight a word, it now can give you a picture of that word along with a pronunciation of it, so you don't have to go out someplace else to get that. This is supposed to work not only in OneNote, but it's also part of Learning Tools, so it's available in Word, Word Online, OneNote Online, and anywhere else in Microsoft where the Learning Tools are located. So you can go check that out, try it out. If you need help with that, contact us at DLA Support, and I will give you the best support that I can.
That's it for In Case You Missed It. Coming up next, Hot Take.
At this week's Hot Take, we're taking a look at a singular article. It's from Mindshift, one of my favorite blogs out there. It's called A Futuristic Look at Assessing Learning. When I first presented this article to Suzanne, I was pretty excited because it's a big change what they're talking about. And I know for me, I didn't even realize, think about the whole process of assessing. I know we give tests and we try to make sure that those tests meets different levels and different standards, but this goes into a much deeper thing that we're talking about. And one of the reasons why this article jumped out at me, Suzanne, is because of a particular book that you had mentioned in the past called The Distracted Mind, Ancient Brains in a High-Tech World. And the author, one of the co-authors of that book, Dr. Adam Gazzaley, is saying that we're experiencing a global cognition crisis. And so I had to really really think about that and what does he mean by cognition? He kind of points out that education has been built on transferring information content but not really building the underlying information processing systems that it's dependent upon.
Right, Mike, as you know, I was very excited when I saw that The Distracted Mind, Ancient Brains in a High-Tech World. I immediately recognized that and I thought, oh, I'm going to love this article. But of course it takes me a while to really digest what he's saying. So that sentence that you just read, I'm going to reread because I had to reread it twice, maybe 3 times to really understand what he's saying. So he said, education has been built on transferring information content, so picture the teacher in front of the classroom delivering their knowledge, but not really building the underlying information processing systems that this depends on. So then you're translating that to all the critical thinking skills that we're talking about constantly. And that's how true is that? What I loved later on in the article is his analogy to medicine.
Yes.
And as he described that, I just thought, wow, what a perfect analogy. So, for example, he said both the medical world and education use poor initial assessments in that in the medical world, few doctors are utilizing brain scans, instead relying on outdated paper and pencil tests. And similarly in education, he says that we don't have a starting point for understanding from each child's cognitive abilities. I did have a question mark next to that because I think we do a really good job about trying to assess where children are starting. But I understood where he was coming from. He went on to say, this is a point that I really keyed in on. He went on to say that many pharmaceuticals target broad body systems, requiring doctors and patients to spend a lot of time monitoring and managing the side effects of medication. I'm like, well, that's true. That's very true. And I won't go off on a tangent about my opinions on the medical world. But he said, in education, we hope that providing information content will develop students' core abilities, but we don't precisely target underlying cognitive abilities. So in a nutshell, it's such a great analogy, right? Because that's exactly what we do. We teach children everything in the hopes that something is going to be exactly what they need, which is the best that we can do, but we can improve on targeting their specific talents.
Even before that part of the article, though, I liked how, like, when we're thinking about developing the brain, and he kind of mentioned physical fitness. Humans have developed specialized equipment, and so, like, we've gone through in different parts of our lives, we've gone through and assessed what we need, assessed how to do it, created things to do it so that it is better. There's a reason why if I were to tear my ACL, I could be out like limping around on crutches for a lot longer than a professional athlete who tears his ACL and is back up and running and jumping higher, and his arm is stronger from the Tommy John surgery after a year. Who knows how long it would take for a regular person who going through Tommy John's surgery or an ACL tear to really heal. But we do know that with physical fitness and professional sports in particular, like they've assessed, like acutely assessed what was wrong, created systems that went directly at those things that are wrong to make them better. And then jumping into your first point that you talked about, like the initial assessments and how doctors don't use brain scans or body scans or any of that, they ask questions. And I can think back to when my son broke his arm recently. The first thing was, well, how much pain is he in? As he's sitting there crying his eyes out, I'm like, well, a lot. And like they didn't do any x-rays at first. It was all like arm touching and looking and writing notes. And while they were able to diagnose that something was wrong, it took them many hours when it could have easily been, well, let's go and we can tell that something's wrong. A quick touch, we see that 3 hours later, we're getting an x-ray to tell us that something's wrong. Instead of, it looks broken, let's go get that x-ray now, instead of waiting and asking questions. And like, I'm not knocking the doctors. They did a great job at managing my child's pain, but we sat there for hours not knowing what to do or what we were doing until they had gone through all of their questions. I think I answered the same set of questions like 10 times before we even had an x-ray to say, oh yeah, it is broken.
Right. So it's a great story, Mike, because that, sorry to cut you off, but I'm thinking that describes so clearly how the medical world addresses very broadly what the cause may be. They had to do all of those, slower tests and ask all those questions because that's what they do. They have to understand the broad picture, just as in education, we're approaching everything from that broad spectrum.
Right. And so then that's where like the first part, like trying to assess what the cognitive abilities are. I don't know about you, but I can't remember what tests we use to like test cognitive ability. I know what tests we use to test content knowledge.
Right. So in the primary grades, I know when I taught kindergarten, we used DIBELS and DRAs, but there's a whole set of tests that are used at the primary level to assess where students are at. But I was thinking as you were talking, it's still, isn't it so much harder to assess a human being's brain and cognitive ability than it is to assess anything physical? It's much easier to perfect the world of physical fitness because for the most part, human bodies operate the same way, not thinking about all the different variables that can come in, but to really understand the human brain is so much more complicated. Because
every brain is different.
Exactly.
So I like the idea in the second part. They basically call it poor targeting, is that you're taking your not as good tests that you're doing at the beginning and trying to target it. And like, all right, so we're going to go and fix these things. And third point that they make is that they're largely non-personalized. In medicine, they write a prescription. Everybody can get that same prescription for symptoms that are similar. I think to those commercials you see on TV. I actually timed it one night. It was a 1.5-minute commercial where only 20 seconds of it was talking about the benefits of whatever drug it was. I don't remember the drug. I just remember, like, I've seen this commercial like 10 times in the past hour and a half. I'm going to time it. So I timed it, and it was on almost a minute of side effects, and this could do this. I'm like, well, how do you know if you're allergic to it if you've never had it before? So, because they're like, don't take it if you're allergic to it. Well, how do you know? And so, like, it's non-personalized, like those kind of over-the-counter medicines. And they write, as it says here, and I don't know the whole medical field enough to know how accurate this statement is, but prescription dosages based on the outcomes of large studies. Well, what's a large study? I remember from statistics, a large study could be anything over 30 people. And so it's very vague. And then with our curriculums that we use, as he points out, it's very less focused on individual profile. And I think it's something that we're actually addressing this coming year with professional development, is trying to, how can we personalize this more for the students? And so, like, that's where we're at right now, is where it hasn't been very personalized. The education that I got going through school was the same as everybody else my age in my school, despite the fact that we were all at different cognitive abilities. And some of us could have been doing other things which could have helped us later on.
Right. I think it's definitely changing. And I know there are teachers out there who are very good at personalizing the learning for students. But it's something that we can definitely improve upon. And it's a lot of hard work and takes a lot of time, but it's definitely worth it in the long run.
I know his next point, I'm like, we're working really hard at not doing anymore, which was the unimodal approach, where for medicine, one pill can solve everything. And for education, one mode of teaching, one model of teaching will fit all students. We know that that's factually incorrect because we have been in classrooms. We know that not every student learns the same way. Not every adult works and learns the same way. So even like putting people into boxes of like, this is how this job is supposed to be. You now need to fit this job, instead of how do you fit into the job? Or how do you fit into the learning of the classroom?
Elaborate a little bit on that, because I'm thinking slightly differently on that. So your understanding of a unimodal approach is?
Everybody gets the same thing.
Okay. And when I read that, as he referred to it, one model of teaching will fit all students in the classroom. In my mind, I recalled schools that I taught in where the daily schedule of every teacher within a particular content area was supposed to be identical. And the format of going through centers was supposed to be identical. So it was, I guess I'm saying it was more the logistics of how a teacher was delivering that content that was supposed to be identical, which really you can do that to a certain extent, but then you've got to customize it based on the students in front of you. So
right. And so to take what you're thinking a little further into how I interpret this, every center is the same. Every first grade classroom is teaching the same thing the same way.
Yeah.
So I think I took it one step further than what you were thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And so this last part was kind of the one that I was like, huh? Which was the idea of open loop.
I can understand your initial reaction to that because I thought the same thing. What in the world is open loop? But then as I continued to read, it made perfect sense to me. So again, comparing it to the medical world, he says that patients might take a pill and subjectively monitor the effects and side effects, and then it's not until weeks or months later that the doctor might raise or lower their dosage, and then it's this whole other cycle of, okay, is the medicine working now, and what are the side effects now? And again, another 6 months go by before the doctor finds the exact dosage that works or finds some other variable that's influencing how they feel, and they need to address that. And I thought, yep, that's exactly how the educational world works. We're doing the best we can, and we deliver content, and we provide all these great opportunities for students. But it is that open loop. It takes so long to really see the benefits of what we're doing, which can be frustrating at times.
Yes. So, I think I came to that same conclusion as you had just eloquently put it. This idea of the open loop, it's too long. We have ANET 1, 2, and 3, but those ANETs 1, 2, and 3 are 3 months apart. After an ANET, we're supposed to take about a week, or this is when I was teaching. I don't know if it's changed any in the last couple of years, but after ANET, we're supposed to, within the next week or two, reteach what the lowest part of that test was and then move on. When the reality is there might have been many low parts to that test, and we need to continually reteach those things along the way and assess them along the way. So in some ways, the open loop, while you do update and try to improve upon what you did before, a lot of times that open loop just gets left open. I feel like from what I've experienced as a teacher myself, and from what I can see in the greater education system nationwide, is that when it comes to assessing students and assessing where they're at, there are some teachers who are very great and are able to reassess pretty quickly and reteach pretty quickly, and others who take longer and then could have been more effective if it was done on a shorter loop, I guess, is the way to put it.
Right. So in case you think that we're heading down a path of negativity, don't worry.
Or constant assessment.
Right. Because as this author said, we don't need to throw out what we have. We just need to remedy our cognition crisis. And we need to parallel the system that we have with targeted, personalized, multimodal, and closed-loop systems. And how can we do that? Through technology. So right away, I'm like, all right, cool. This can definitely be done. As impatient as we are with the process being what it is, that's not going to change, but we can make huge steps forward by using technology.
Yes. So as we continued to read on in the article, my favorite word, multitasking, came up. And the article said 95% of people reported multitasking with technology every day. And then I'm like, oh, great, this is going to be another one of those things. But then he follows it up with this next statement, which I'm like, yes, true. Which is, the constant drain on our attention affects our cognitive control, or the mental ability that enable us to enact our goals, which includes attention, working memory, and goal management.
And I'll just reiterate, because I remember this from that past article, the whole effect on working memory is known as digital dementia. So if any of you are thinking that you've got digital dementia, you do.
So this idea that we are using technology as a way to multitask, doing more having our brains do more than one thing at a time, it's really affecting our cognitive abilities. And so by using technology, I think of the noise cancellation headphones. Like that is a tool that has been created to help with the multi-sensory things going on so that when you're wearing them, you're focused in on not hearing the rest of the world. Now, I'm not saying that people are just having the headphones on and not listening to anything, because they very well could be listening to music, which is activating their brain. They could be reading a book at the same time, so now they're multitasking because they're listening to the music and reading a book. And I don't know about you, but when I do those two things together, I don't know how often it happens, but I know it does. When I'm reading the book, I'm reading the line, and all of a sudden the next sentence in the book is whatever the line is in the song, because I start singing along. So I'm no longer reading the book. I'm looking at the words. I'm processing that there's words there that I'm following along, but in my mind, it's going back to whatever song I'm listening to.
Right. This could lead us into a whole nother podcast, I think, with the right articles, because I cannot listen to music if I'm reading a book. I cannot have any extraneous noise if I need to study for an exam. My husband, on the other hand, can have the television on, looking at his iPad and listening to music, and probably two other things coming in, and he can do that. I cannot. So again, it's figuring out how our students learn best and being able to accommodate them.
And he also mentioned with this distracted mind that cognitive interference, which is too many things going on at once, affects our sleep, relationship, education, emotion, working memory, decision-making, and perceptions.
Right. So think of what our students are encountering in their world, all the stimulation that they have. And the key is to take control over how we use technology. That's the challenge that teachers have today, is teaching our students how to manage all the technology in their lives.
So I think the biggest takeaway, and I think this is true with a lot of articles that focus in on scientific ability, is that there might not be any answers yet on how to do it. And that's why we have colleges and universities and study tanks and think tanks that are trying to figure out how best to help our students. I know he's working part of Neuroscape, which is at the UC San Francisco, where they're developing and testing several closed-loop technologies to enhance cognition. And I think that's the biggest thing, is how do we create these closed-loop interventions so that the students' cognitive abilities are targeted for their specific needs.
Right. And I think there are several that exist already that teachers are using today. I'd love to hear from our listeners as to how they're using different intervention software in the classroom, and maybe we can talk about that next time.
Yeah. So this article is a futuristic look at assessing learning from the Mindshift blog. It will be in our show notes. Coming up next is our interview with Jen Cherry.
Our interview this week is with Jen Cherry at Sci-Tech. Mike had a great interview with her. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. You can hear how this phenomenal science teacher uses technology in her classroom that is very much project-based and career-oriented. Science is not my strong point, but I was fascinated to hear all the great things she's doing. Enjoy.
Years, fresh out of college, and I've been here ever since. And I teach biomedical science, AP environmental science, and biology enrichment.
12 years ago, when you first stepped foot, because you said you've been here the whole time, what kind of technology did you have in your classroom?
I had an awesome whiteboard.
Just a whiteboard, no projector?
We had an old school projector with the bulbs that went every 4 months or so, and that was about it. So it was a lot of writing on the overheads, and then a year or two later, we got our first round of computer carts that we could sign out every now and then. And so we had kids, could do a web quest. Very simple kind of things in terms of what we're able to do now.
So you started out with WebQuest, and clearly you've grown from there. So
yes.
In the last, we'll say 5 or 6 years, what kind of technology have you used with your biology classes and all your other classes?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of PowerPoint. Kids love the PowerPoint for presentations. My classes are very project-based, so they're doing a lot of peer teaching, and between PowerPoint and Prezi, we've kind of learned how to use those. So we've started to use Vengage.com, which is a place where students can create their own infographics. And we're just learning how to use that now. I'm still learning how to use that.
Nice. So do you use any of the learning management systems with your class?
Like Brightspace?
Yes, like Brightspace.
Yes, we love Brightspace. We live on Brightspace. I've tried to flip my AP class to have kids do learning at home, so I'm not doing in-class notes. And so I put their notes, all of our activities that we're doing in class, homework, everything goes on Brightspace, so they always have access to it. Their textbook is on Brightspace, so they always have access to class. We also are using Remind.com so that we can interact with each other when we're not in class, and the kids can send me a text for all intents and purposes, kind of get an easy answer rather than sending an email and waiting for a response.
From what you're describing and what you've talked about, you started to do some more of the blending / flipped classroom. We kind of throw those words around all the time. How have the students reacted to that? I
think they enjoy using the technology and learning some new things. I know that there are some students who are a little bit resistant in terms of, especially with test taking, they would rather paper and pencil. But in terms of presentations and things like that, I think they're really taking to digital presentations. It looks really fancy. We're learning how to use all different tools in it so that it can look very professional. We're kind of a little bit career oriented in these particular classes, so I think those are good skills for them to have moving forward.
Since you've mentioned you use a lot of PowerPoints with your students and they create PowerPoints, did you have to do a lot of pre-teaching on how to use PowerPoint, or did they come to you being AP students, for example, with a strong background in technology tools?
Yeah, my upper school kids definitely have more experience with it, and it's kind of their go-to presentation, to the point where I'm trying to get them to break out of the PowerPoint realm into something else. So they have a lot of skills. Some of my underclassmen, I get some freshmen, not a ton. My sophomores, I have to really pre-teach how to, maybe change the background or how to use different fonts or insert pictures and things like that. But it's usually a case-by-case situation where I'm going around and helping, troubleshoot rather than pre-teaching a whole lesson on how to use the tool.
So there was one tool we were talking before we started recording that you had mentioned that you guys use quite a bit here, and I gave you a blank stare like I have no clue what you're talking about. So could you share that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So in science, we use Vernier Probes, which is scientific probeware that we can use for data collection. And that probeware works directly with a program called Logger Pro, which is also available through Vernier, and it kind of comes with the probes. So we use Logger Pro for things like measuring heart rate, so students can actually see their heartbeat in real time on the computer through this program. And they are designing and implementing their own labs on testing heart rate, and then they can actually see, okay, here's my live data. This is how my heartbeat is changing with different types of exercise or something like that. We've also used it for testing blood pressure. We have learned how to read an EKG, which they're using the same software for. In my AP class, we go on an annual fieldwork trip, and the students are studying stream flow data. So in order to study stream flow, they have to calculate the volume of water that's moving through an area. So in order to do that, they have to map the bottom of an inlet and take depth readings. And we use Logger Pro to actually map what the section of that inlet would look like so that we can calculate the volume of water that's moving through it. So it's a really versatile program in terms of what we have. We also have carbon dioxide sensors that we can manage. We can record carbon dioxide readings. We've used it for temperature readings for calorimetry and in chemistry as well as in biomedical science. So it's something that can be used kind of across our department.
It also sounds like it involves a lot of mathematical skills too. That's seem very important. I mean, knowing biology and what I remember from high school, math was a big part of a lot of the things that we had to do. So it also helps with that, I'm guessing?
It does. It helps us be like way more cross-curricular. I'm terrible at math, so I love that, you know, it can kind of help us with some of those calculations, like finding the volume of the water. Computer does all that for me. So that's really helpful. But yeah, so it helps us with like that really like finite data collection and graphing skills for the kids. They get a visual from it, so it's pretty great.
So now this program, a couple of questions, because I know nothing about it, and so I'm imagining many of our listeners don't know as much either. Is it free?
So I believe you have to purchase the equipment in order to get the software.
And do you know if any other science departments, any of the other high school science departments are using it, or
Don't
know?
No.
But it's one that you would recommend, though, for a lot of the curriculum that you're doing.
Yeah, I love it. And I know that our chemistry teacher uses it frequently. And I believe our AP physics teacher uses it sometimes as well for different.
So are there any other programs that you use regularly or that your students use regularly that we haven't talked about yet?
We also use Inspiration, which is like a concept mapping and mind mapping tool. So the students, instead of drawing a concept map on paper, they can create one in the computer. That one requires a lot of pre-teaching. The students have to figure out how to use all the tools and how to link the bubbles correctly, especially if there are arrows in it. We want to make sure all the arrows are pointing in the right way so that's read correctly. So that one I use a little less frequently, but I do like it because I think it, you know, it kind of helps students arrange their thoughts in a way that is neat and organized, because sometimes their spatial awareness is not that great on a smaller piece of paper, and here they just have like this plain white space that they can just spread out on. And they can also use it for outlines, which is nice.
Nice. So you had mentioned, I'm thinking back through our conversation so far, you mentioned online textbooks, and I can see behind us, we're in your classroom right now, so I can see textbooks here too. How are they different? Do they work together? Are they even the same?
So the online text is the exact same thing as the print text. The online text for biology offers some quizzes that you can assign to your students. It will actually read the text to the students, especially if they're having, you know, if they're maybe English language learners, they need to hear. It'll do like a live glossary. So if there's a word that's highlighted, they can get the definition right away. There's all sorts of different assessments. There's virtual labs. So there's like a whole package that comes with it. So
do you find that students respond better to the online version as opposed to the, I'm going to say, very thick, heavy version behind you? Or is it kind of like 50-50?
It's like, maybe 50-50. I think the virtual labs and like the accessories kind of that come with the online textbook are what they respond more to. I think with the print version, they like being able to, you know, instantly kind of find where the chapter is rather than trying to figure it out on the computer.
I don't want to take up any more of your time on this lovely day. It is nice out if you have not been outside yet. I had to get here. But I do have one last question for you, and that is, if you had the opportunity to stand in front of all the new hires, you've been in the district now 12 years. Every year, the new hires come in, they have to go through a week of training before school starts. If you had the opportunity to stand in front of them, what advice would you give? And it doesn't have to be technology related either.
Oh. Well, if it was technology related, I would say that I can often be overwhelmed as a veteran teacher with all of the resources that are out there. So I would say pick one thing to start with that you want to implement in your classroom and implement that one thing to start. Kind of become an expert and then add something else, kind of like new curriculum, you know, start with what you know, teach through the book once, and then start like cutting back and, you know, adding your own twists and turns into it rather than trying to just, you know, dabble in everything. Because I think then it kind of gets, I don't know, I feel chaotic that way. So that would be my advice. And there are lots of resources out there aside from technology. I think, you know, every school has something different to offer. And so just, you know, knowing who your resources are, people to go to, and, you know, using them effectively, knowing that we are like a tribe and that we're all here to support each other. I think that's the best advice I could offer. Find your tribe.
Well, thank you for that. I hope our listeners get as much out of it as I did today. So again, thank you.
So you just heard our interview with Jen Cherry from Sci-Tech. I have to say, Suzanne, I am so glad I got the chance to go and finally meet with her. We've been trying to set up an interview for the better part of a year now. Just some of the things that she's doing in her classroom sound amazing, and I think I would have liked biology a lot more in high school.
I was just thinking the same thing. I totally would have liked science more if she had been my teacher.
So one of the cool things I really think are those probes that she's talking about, and the, what was it called? The
Vernier?
Vernier. Yeah, those things sound amazing, and I love the fact that she's doing a lot of project-based learning, because that, to me, that's where we're heading.
Right, it gets students involved. They're excited about using the technology in class. They're getting experience with the presentations, all skills that they're going to need when they get out into the quote-unquote real world.
And I like how she's taking the textbook, which I saw the textbooks. I think I even commented. They were pretty thick. And how, like, they're available online. And through Brightspace, they have notes, and I like how she's using our learning management system. You can use any learning management system this way, which is great, to really get the students to kind of get the background knowledge and then come in and start to do the projects together so that they can do an EKG. They don't need to learn what is an EKG and why do I need to know how to use it. They get the practice in class instead of trying to learn what it is in class.
Exactly. And in case there's anyone out there who is not convinced yet of the flipped classroom model, my daughter, who's in college, experienced that firsthand, where she had a lab to go to. She did her homework as she was directed to, and she got to the lab, and so many of the students around her were looking at her saying, Hannah, how do you know what to do? How do you know what's going on? How do you know all this? And she looked at them and said, I read the book. That's what I was supposed to do. So it's something that is used throughout at higher level institutions, not just high school.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to the technology that we have available to us. I know she had put in grants to get the probes and the software for the probes so that they can take them and go do real world testing with them and do the EKGs, and I'm going to get these medical terms mixed up, I swear, so that they can actually practice them. And I think she's really setting those students up so that they can go towards a career, not just go to college, get some knowledge, and get a job after college, but really help them find a career. Because a lot of stuff they're doing there, if those students wait until college and then they find out that this really isn't for me, they're already in a year. And so that I'm having a lot of college loans myself, I'm very conscious of I want students, if they want to go to college, if for what they want to do they need to go to college, to be prepared, because it does cost money, and hopefully they can get a lot of grants and not have to take on any loans. So for her students, they get this opportunity to try these things, to use this equipment and be like, you know what, a medical field is exactly what I want to go into, which I think is pretty spot on. Yeah. Or something to do with environmental sciences.
Oh, right. I didn't mention the environmental science class. That's awesome too. I know we're running out of time, so I'll let you heard it in the interview. I'm sure you're as impressed as I was. But thank you so much, Jen. We appreciate your time and look forward to talking to you again soon.
So as we wrap up today, we just want to remind you to go out to wherever you listen to the podcast, leave us reviews, leave us comments, leave us questions, whether that is on iHeartRadio or Spreaker or Microsoft Stream, which all the podcasts are listed there too, or YouTube or iTunes or Google Play, or we're in a lot of places. So I encourage you to go out there wherever you listen to us, leave us comments, leave us feedback. We'd love to hear from you. If there's things that you would like us to talk about or to research more, because quite frankly, you don't have the time, but you do want to learn, we would love to be able to do that too. So you got to send us those topic ideas, those things that we can talk about during Hot Takes. Also, if you yourself, or if you know someone who would be great to interview about this way that they're using technology in the classroom, also message us at DLA Support. We would love to be able to set up a time to talk with them. And also, DLA has got a project that we're beginning to work on. It's called the Yammer videos. So essentially, these videos are going to be designed to help teachers like yourself with integrating technology into the classroom. We want to take some of the best practices we've seen in the district and put it to video so that people have the opportunity to see, because we don't have the ability to always go and visit everybody's classroom multiple times to see how they're integrating technology. We love to be able to bring that to you as a way of learning. Now, as we talked about with our article, this is just one mode of learning. Of course, I'm sure that there's other people out there who just need to read about it and then can do it. But we know that some people need the visuals, and we want to help create those. So if you've got any ideas or you'd like to be a part of that, please contact us at DLA Support. To wrap up today, I'm Mike Thomas.
I'm Suzanne Sargis.
And we'll see you next week.